On the road map was one long red line called Route 6 that led from the tip of Cape Cod to Ely, Nevada, and there dipped down to Los Angeles. I'll just stay on 6 all the way to Ely, I said to myself, and I confidently started. To get to 6, I had to go up the Bear Mountain, filled with dreams of what I'd do in Chicago, in Denver, and then finally in San Francisco. I took the 7th Avenue subway to the end of the line at 242nd Street, and there I took a streetcar to Yonkers. He's going across the country. In downtown Yonkers, I transferred to an outgoing trolley and went to the city limits on the east bank of the Hudson River. If you drop a rose in the Hudson River at its mysterious source in the Adirondacks, think of all the places it journeys by as it goes to sea forever. Think of that wonderful Hudson Valley. Well, I started hitching up the thing. 5 scattered rides took me to the desired Bear Mountain Bridge where Route 6 arched in from New England. It began to rain in torrents when I was let off there. So that's the beginning of it. Isn't it a nice start for a book? Now, I'll skip down to where he's in Newburg, New York. He's been hitchhiking to Newburg, and he started out. So one thing about him, he had a good sense of humor about himself. He said, I stepped right up and I gestured in the rain. He said, I look like a maniac, of course, with my hair all wet, my shoes sopping. My shoes, damn fool that I am, were Mexican huaraches, plant-like sieves, not fit for the rainy night of America and the raw road night. But here he is in Newburg, and now he's beginning his trip across the country by bus and by hitchhiking in every possible way. And I've dug up something else here. If you'll get that turntable ready in there, Herb. No, the turntable now. Now, wait, I'll give you the cue for this. There was another guy. Of course, musicians were all part of this movement. I'll have to bring a lot of different people into this great saga of that period. Just about that time, as I had just come in, I was very fortunate. I came to New York just at the time it was all beginning, and guys were coming from all different parts of the country without any knowledge of each other. It wasn't a matter of, New York was drawing people like a magnet then. And one night, not long after I'd gotten here, it was a hot August night, I remember. I got a phone call from a guy, and it was a musician, one of the, if there could have been called the epitome, and I'm going to use the phrase that became popular at the time, the beat musician. It was Lenny Tristano. He had a loft somewhere, I believe, on 32nd Street. And I went into this loft at night. It was dark, and everybody sitting around purple lights, and the smoke was swirling, and Tristano, who was a blind pianist, was quietly playing away over in the corner, and girls were lying around all over the floor. It was all the part of that great exploding thing. And later on, it spread over to the Cedars Bar and Dylan's. And of course, at that time, people like Dylan Thomas were still around, hanging around places like the White Horse. So I thought that a little of this, the music has to set the mood. This is Tristano. And this was all at the time when Kerouac was writing and the Village Voice was beginning and everything was starting to explode. And a lot of old things were falling by the road and a lot of new things were beginning, although nobody quite knew it at the time. We were just there, and it was strange and hot and sweaty and very exciting. This is Chapter 3, or part of it, of On the Road by Jack Kerouac, who was part of that whole scene. It was an ordinary bus trip. He's just left Newburg, with crying babies and hot sun and country folk getting out at one pen town after another till we got onto the plain of Ohio and really rolled up by Ashtabula straight across Indiana in the night. I arrived in Chicago quite early in the morning, got a room in the Y, and went to bed with a very few dollars in my pocket. And then I dug Chicago after a good night's sleep. The wind from Lake Michigan, jazz in the Loop, long walks around South Halsted and North Clark, and one long walk after midnight into the jungles where a cruising car followed me like a suspicious character. At this time, 1947, bop was going like mad all over America. The fellows at the Loop blew, but with a tired air, because bop was somewhere between its Charlie Parker ornithology period and another period that began with Miles Davis. And as I sat there listening to that sound of the night which bop has come to represent from all of us, I thought of all my friends, from one end of the country to the other, and how they were really all in the same vast backyard, doing something so frantic and rushing about. And for the first time in my life, the following afternoon, I went into the West that I'd always dreamed about. It was a warm and beautiful day for hitchhiking. To get out of the impossible complexities of Chicago traffic, I took a bus to Joliet, Illinois, and went by the Joliet Pen, stationed myself just outside of town after a walk through its leafy, rickety streets behind, and pointed my way, all the way from New York to Joliet by bus. And already I'd spent more than half of my money. Well, the first ride was a dynamite truck with a red flag, about 30 miles into Great Green, Illinois. The truck driver pointing out the place where Route 6, which we were on, intersects Route 66 before they both shoot west for incredible distances. Along about 3 in the afternoon, after an apple pie and ice cream in a roadside stand, a woman stopped for me in a little coupe. I had a twinge of hard joy as I ran after the car. But she was a middle-aged woman, actually the mother of sons my age, and wanted somebody to help her to drive to Iowa. I was all for it. Iowa, not so far from Denver. And once I got to Denver, I could relax. She drove the first few hours. At one point, insisted on visiting an old church somewhere, as if we were tourists. Then I took the wheel over. And although I'm not much of a driver, I drove clear through the rest of Illinois to Davenport, Iowa, via Rock Island. And here, for the first time in my life, I saw the beloved Mississippi. Dry in the summer haze, low water, with its big, rank smell. It smells like the raw body of America itself, because it washes it up. Rock Island, railroad tracks, shacks, small downtown section. And over the bridge to Davenport, same kind of town, all smelling of sawdust and the warm Midwest sun. Here, the lady had to go on to her Iowa hometown by another route, and I got out. The sun was going down. I walked, after a few cold beers, to the edge of town, and it was a long walk. A long, long walk. All the men were driving home from work, wearing railroad hats, baseball hats, all kinds of hats, just like after work in any town anywhere. One of them gave me a ride up the hill and left me at a lonely crossroads on the edge of the big prairie. It was beautiful there. The only cars that came by were farm cars. They gave me suspicious looks. They clanked along. The cows were coming home. Not a truck. A few cars zipped by. A hot rod kid came by with his scarf flying. The sun went down, all the way down. And now I was standing in the purple darkness. Now I was scared. There weren't even any lights in the Iowa countryside. In a minute, nobody would be able to see me. Luckily, a man going back to Davenport gave me a lift downtown. But now I was right where I started from. Well, I went to sit in the bus station and think this over. I ate another apple pie and ice cream. And in fact, that's practically all I ate all the way across the country. I knew it was, of course, nutritious, and it was delicious, of course. I decided to gamble. I took a bus in downtown Davenport after spending a half hour watching a waitress in a bus station cafe, and rode to the city limits, but this time near the gas stations. Here the big trucks roared, wham, and inside 2 minutes, one of them cranked to a stop for me. I ran for it with my soul hollering whoopee. And what a driver. A big, tough truck driver with popping eyes and a hoarse, raspy voice, who just slammed and kicked at everything, got his rig underway, and paid hardly any attention to me. So I could rest my tired soul a little. For one of the biggest troubles hitchhiking is having to talk to innumerable people, make them feel that they didn't make a mistake picking you up, even entertain them almost, all of which is a great strain when you're going all the way and don't plan to sleep in hotels. The guy just yelled over the roar. Once in a while they'd holler something at me, and all I could do was yell back. So we relaxed. And he bawled that thing clear to Iowa City and yelled me the funniest stories about how he got around the law in every town that had an unfair speed limit, saying over and over again the one thing he said all the time, yelling it out. Them damn cops don't put no flies on me. Just as we rolled into Iowa City, he saw another truck coming behind us, and because he had to turn off at Iowa City, he blinked his taillights at the other guy and slowed down for me to jump out, which I did with my bag. And the other truck, acknowledging this exchange, stopped for me. And once again, in the twink of nothing, I was in another big high cab, all set to go, hundreds of miles across the night. And man, was I happy. And the new truck driver was as crazy as the other, and yelled just as much. And all I had to do was just lean back and roll on, and roll on. Now I could see Denver looming ahead of me like the promised land, way out there beneath the stars, across the prairie of Iowa and the plains of Nebraska. And I could see the greater vision of San Francisco beyond, like jewels in the night. Well, he bawled to Jack and told stories for a couple of hours, and then at a town in Iowa, where years later Dean and I were stopped on suspicion in what looked like a stolen Cadillac, he slept a few hours in the seat. I slept too. I took one little walk along the lonely brick walls illuminated by one lamp, with the prairie brooding at the end of each little street, and the smell of the corn like dew in the night. Suddenly he woke up with a start, at dawn, and off we roared. And an hour later, the smoke of Des Moines appeared ahead, over the green cornfields. He had to eat his breakfast now, and wanted to take it easy. So I went right on into Des Moines, about 4 miles, hitching a ride with 2 boys from the University of Iowa. It was strange sitting in their brand-new, comfortable car, and hear them talk of exams as we moved smoothly into town. Now I wanted to sleep a whole day. So I went to the Y to get a room. They didn't have any. By instinct, I wandered down to the railroad tracks. There's a lot of them in Des Moines. And I wound up in a gloomy old Plains Inn of a hotel by the locomotive roundhouse and spent a long day sleeping on a big, clean, hard white bed with dirty remarks carved in the wall beside my pillow and the beat yellow window shades pulled over the smoky scene of the railroad yards. I woke up a long time after, just as the sun was getting red. And that was the one distinct time in my life, the strangest moment of all, when I didn't know who I was. I was far away from home, haunted, tired with travel, in a cheap hotel room I'd never seen, hearing the hiss of steam outside and the creak of the old wood of the hotel and footsteps upstairs and all the sad sounds. And I looked at the cracked high ceiling and really didn't know who I was for about 15 strange seconds. I wasn't scared. I was just somebody else, some stranger. And my whole life was a haunted life, the life of a ghost. I was halfway across America, at the dividing line between the east of my youth and the west of my future. And maybe that's why it happened right then and there, that strange red afternoon. But I had to get going and stop moaning. So I picked up my bag, said so long to the old hotel keeper, sitting by his spittoon, and went to eat. I ate apple pie and ice cream. It was getting better as I got deeper into Iowa. The pie bigger, the ice cream richer. There were the most beautiful girls everywhere. Everywhere I looked in Des Moines that afternoon. They were coming home from high school. But I had no time for thoughts like that. But I promised myself a ball in Denver. Carlo Marx was already in Denver. Dean was there. Chad King and Tom Gray were there. It was their hometown. Mary Lou was there. And there was mention of a mighty gang, including Ray Rawlins and his beautiful blonde sister, Babe Rawlins. 2 waitresses Dean knew, the Betancourt sisters, and even Roland Major, my old college writing buddy, was there. I rushed, and I looked forward to all of them with joy. So I rushed past the pretty girls. And believe me, the prettiest girls in the world live in Des Moines. Interesting book, isn't it? Just rolls on and on. And then he goes on. He says, a guy with a kind of tool shack on wheels, a truck full of tools that he drove, standing up like a modern milkman, gave me a ride up the long hill, where I immediately got a ride from a farmer and his son, heading out for Adel in Iowa. In this town, under a big elm tree near a gas station, I made the acquaintance of another hitchhiker, a typical New Yorker, an Irishman who had been driving a truck for the post office most of his work years and was now headed for a girl in Denver and a new life. I think he was running away from something in New York, the law most likely. He was a real red-nosed young drunk of 30 and would have bored me ordinarily, except now my senses were sharp for any kind of human friendship after hitchhiking for so many hours. He wore a big sweater and baggy pants and had nothing with him at all in the way of a bag, just a toothbrush sticking out of his pocket and handkerchiefs. He said we ought to hitch together. I should have said no, because he looked awful on the road. But we stuck together, and we got a ride with a taciturn, silent man to Stewart, Iowa, a town in which we were really stranded.